I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. All right, we are almost to the election, so we are going to talk about this. And I know many of you, like me, you've already voted. That's great. But I think probably the majority of people still are going to the polls on Tuesday. And there's a very serious question before us because there's a lot of, there is a coordinated, I call it manipulation campaign in the media. And it's not just politicians doing their usual exaggeration or stretching the truth. That's happened since the beginning. I get that. I take everything a politician says with a big grain of salt. I don't care which letter's after your name. That's just the way I listen to politicians, and I think we should. And that, as long as you know that's what's going on, I think you can cope with it. But there's a very serious question that is being pushed, not just in the media, not just on the extremes, right down the middle, and by candidates, by politicians, and even by some people in the church. And that is this idea that one of the candidates, Donald Trump in this case, is basically Adolf Hitler. He's promised to be a dictator. He admires, Nazi Germany, which we're going to talk about that. But let me put it this way. If that was the case, I would be jumping up and down, screaming, yelling, saying we need to run from this as fast as we can. Fascism, it's a word we hear all the time. I don't know if people understand what it means, but is it true? If it's true, then I would be saying, hey, you need to get out there and vote this way. Is it true? We're going to talk about that and some other things related to the election. And I promise you, come Tuesday, we won't be talking about it for a while, regardless of the results. And in fact, I have a few days off. I've already recorded some interviews. So, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, after the election, those interviews are already done, and they will inspire you. And we will get to the higher level things. But I think as Christians, we need to be involved in every area of culture, influencing every area of culture. And yeah, I do think politics is one of them. Someone who agrees with me on that point is a gentleman named Alex McFarland. Many of you probably heard him. He has the Alex McFarland podcast. He's got the radio show called the Alex McFarland Show. He teaches Bible for Charis College, as well as a program that's on the radio, and you can get it online, called Exploring the World. So Alex McFarland joins me. He has been fighting this battle on secular networks and secular newspapers for a while now, and so it's a good resource. Appreciate you guys being here watching. Hit the share button if you want to get this in front of some people before the election. Alex, great to have you on the program.
Well, Randy, thank you very much. I really appreciate you and your family, and have been aware of your various ministries for a long time. So it's a great honor to be on with you.
So this is an issue, the whole fascism thing. Is Donald Trump Hitler? It sounds stupid coming out of my mouth, but it's coming out of a lot of mouths these days. You've addressed this directly. What's your take?
Well, it's an insane comparison. Let me say this. First of all, Adolf Hitler began the Holocaust 10 months into his administration. Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933. 10 months later, Dachau, the first concentration camp, was opened. Now, why am I telling you this? All right, if Donald Trump was Hitler, then why didn't we see that from 2016 to 2020? It's crazy. There's much more we could say about this. But here's the thing. What's before us really on November 5th, 2024, are not so much two different candidates, but two vastly different futures, Randy, two vastly different worldviews. Whether or not you like Donald Trump, I've met President Trump. I met him back in 2015 when he was announcing his candidacy, and nobody really took him seriously.
Yeah.
I'm traveling a lot, Randy, speaking, and I remember the fall of 2015, the spring of 2016. Everybody, everywhere I went, I preach in like 30 states a year. Everybody was talking about Donald Trump, and I was telling a lot of my friends. I said, "Look, I know I've met Ted Cruz and his father, and but nobody's talking about Cruz, Marco Rubio, Carly Fiorini.
Mhm.
Everywhere I go in Heartland America, people are talking about Donald Trump." And here's the thing, we had pro-life constitutionalists put on the Supreme Court. America's embassy was built in Jerusalem. By the way, that was a promise that went all the way back to Gerald Ford,
Yeah.
and no American president really had the courage. Even Reagan, who I revere, I voted for Reagan, but Reagan did not put the embassy in Jerusalem. Donald Trump said he would do it, and he did
He
it.
did.
And guess what? World War III didn't happen. We had peace in the Middle East. The southern border was being secured, although the Democrats have fought it. So here's the thing. For those that want to compare Trump to Hitler, that's not even rational. It reflects an utter ignorance or disregard of history. And I think it's just liberals who know their policies fail, and they're throwing any Hail Mary pass they can to try to obstruct the man who is probably the greatest president of any of our lifetimes.
So you know history. You've probably read some of the debates from the 1800s. You know, I mean,
I actually have.
yeah, I figured you had. So we hear this rhetoric, right? You know, oh, if my opponent gets into office, you know, it'll be the end of the country, and or he's this. I mean, in some of it's so antiquated. The 1800 stuff. It sounds kind of funny. The accusations they made of their opponents.
It was called muckraking.
Muckraking. There you go. So, I mean, is this just the same, or is there something different? Because it just feels really different to me, and I don't know if it's just because I don't know. I'm here in this time, and it just always feels different to us, more personal to us. But is this at a different level, you think?
Well, yeah, I really do. I mean, muckraking has always been around. During the Lincoln Douglas debates, Stephen Douglas insinuated that Abraham Lincoln was subhuman and that he was ugly and descended from apes. What's interesting is when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, Stephen Douglas. And I've actually been to the site of the Lincoln Douglas debates, but Stephen Douglas wept over Lincoln's casket and said, "This was the finest human being I ever knew." I do wish that our politics could be a little less acrimonious. But people today, I'll tell you, Randy, what I think is different is, for one, there's social media, and people have a bigger megaphone than ever. I mean, any Yahoo in their parents' basement can have a worldwide megaphone, and that's fine. I believe in free speech and the free expression of ideas. Some different things, though, and you and I probably know this. We live in a time when there's a certain contempt for morals and Christianity.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not merely unbelief and lostness. There's actually a contempt and hostility toward God, truth, moral guardrails. And then there's another thing. There's an absolute ignorance, not only of history, but what our nation is really about. We're not a democracy. I want to say this. Democracy was never threatened on January 6, 2021. Why? Because we're not a democracy. We're a Judeo-Christian representative republic.
Yeah.
And so, Adolf Hitler said this. Adolf Hitler said, "How fortunate for leaders that men don't think." And that's what worries me. Barack Obama, when Barack Obama had illegals streaming into the country and conservatives said, "Secure the border," Barack Obama said, quote, "That's not who we are. We're compassionate." And so I had people all around me, ministers, and by the way, some of the most ignorant people in any given community are pastors. Now, look, I've pastored 2 churches and preached in more than 2,000. Literally, that's not an exaggeration. I've preached in more than 2,000 American churches. And I want to tell you, part of our problem, and I love the Lord Jesus, I love the church, I'm for the church. My life, Randy, is invested in Christ's Great Commission. But that being said, part of what is wrong with America are, of the 345,000 ordained pastors, and that's roughly how many there are, 345,000. In my experience, the vast majority are not terribly intelligent. They have not a lot of moral courage to speak to issues. You know, in your opening audio montage, I heard the words of Billy Graham in there, who I revere. Billy Graham said, "What we need is a Christian revolution."
Yep.
99% of pastors would never use the word revolution because, oh, it might ruffle some feathers. We need ministers, and I want to challenge my fellow clergy. Get in your pulpit and use your prophetic voice to call sinners to salvation and Christians to moral and cultural engagement. That's what we're to do. You know, the Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson, and I've got a friend that's friends with him. I don't know how deep he is in the Lord, but Jordan Peterson has recently come to a Christian faith. And Jordan Peterson, there's a video from August of 22 where he basically slams America's pastors. And he says, look, stop being motivational speakers and save some souls. That's what you're here for.
Yeah.
So anyway,
go
ahead.
I want to. So you mentioned the Billy Graham thing, and that's in my intro on purpose. That wasn't an accident. And the word revolution, yeah, I agree with you. And here's the thing, because right now, the media, and this bothers me as someone who has journalism as a part of my degree. I've worked for secular newspapers and written for magazines and stuff. So I love good journalism. There's not a whole lot of it left. At least it's not the loudest voice out there. There are still some good ones. I definitely see that. But right now, it's less about media and more about manipulation, I believe. By the way, if you're watching, if you're not aware, your media is manipulated, not just in the slant. Everybody has a bias. Let's not pretend that people are unbiased. We can try to be objective, but at the end of the day, we all have an opinion, and that's fine. But the bias is there not just in what they say, but in what they report and what they don't report. Exaggerate some small things, ignore some big things. But also there's this floating idea of the problem, and it's various combinations. Christian nationalism. There's the hit piece disguised as a documentary out there right now on one of the major streaming networks with my dad in the trailer and in the thing, and they're going, this is what he believes, and I'm like, I know the guy. That's not what he believes, and they use his words but they twist them, right? So the manipulation. I mean, your news feed, you guys, if you're looking at I'll name names, Yahoo, Google, Apple, the news feed is manipulate. It's designed to manipulate you. And we have to know that. And I get the news feeds just know that there is an agenda behind all of those things. So we hear Christian nationalism is a problem, or white Christians are the problems, white Christian nationalism. And I'm like, what is going on here? Because and then you hear it from some pastors, and then you find out some of them are being funded by these political groups as well. And you go, okay, follow the money on that one. But it just feels like we, and not so much the white part. I don't even believe in race as a concept.
Right.
But the idea that Christians are the problem in the country, you start to go, wait a minute. That's feeling really antithetical to the history of the country, for one, but almost dangerous. Especially when we look back in 2020 and the stuff going on in the streets, man. I mean, a lot of people. You could be you got to be a little cautious in some cities at certain times, and who knows what's going to happen one way or the other after the election, coming up in a few days. But what do we do? How do we combat this coordinated media manipulation to say that you and I are the problem?
Wow. Well, Isaiah 5 warns about a time coming where people call good evil and evil good. And we're living in that time. I mean, we've got a major political candidate, Kamala Harris, that has advocated for transgenderism and children getting body parts cut off and hormone replacement therapy, and anti-Semitic, I should say. And so, like with Donald Trump, and again, this is not to endorse a political party, either one, but look, one of the hallmarks of a just government, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he wrote about this in his 1963 Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Why We Can't Wait, which was really the philosophical manifesto of the civil rights movement, brilliantly written. Dr. King, quoting Augustine and Thomas Aquinas and others, he says a just government must advocate for the rights and the welfare of the citizens. And true justice is a moral position that is reflective of the character and nature of God. The nature of God doesn't change, therefore morality doesn't change. And so something is moral if it squares up with the character and revelation of God, and also the welfare of the people. So a lot of the positions, you can call it the left, progressivism, wokeness, revisionist, Marxist, CRT. But here's the thing, folks. Forget the labels Republican or Democrat. To keep the border open, to jeopardize the welfare of people. By the way, let me just say, of the number is not exactly known, but roughly 12 to 22 million illegals are here. But they know, and I've got this data from law enforcement officials. I went to the southern border. I visited the border 15 months ago. And I met with law enforcement officials and spoke to several as recently as last week, Randy. There are a little over 650,000 of the illegals that are here. And Vice President Kamala Harris, our border czar, and they've tried to suppress this, but yes, the state of the border and the status of the numbers of illegals here, this is completely Kamala Harris's doing. The population of Boston, think about this, the number of illegals that are known felons or terrorists is equal to the population of Boston, 650 to 70,000 of the roughly 20 million illegals, and they're getting government services. And by the way, our debt has ballooned to $35 trillion. We're quickly reaching the point where interest on the national debt is going to be equal to our GDP. We're headlong rushing toward insolvency. Our national parks, thanks to Barack Obama, Yellowstone Park is really collateral that we owe the Chinese. So I guess, look, it could be Donald Trump, it could be, Ron DeSantis. Who cares the name of the person? But we must start living by our Constitution. We must balance the budget. We must secure the border. I mean, otherwise, and we have a very small window of time to do this, we are going to become just anarchy and lose our nation. Now, Randy, I've got to say this to my Christian friends, and especially the cowardly, convictionless pastors of America who say, well, my home is heaven. Yeah, our home is heaven. But one of the most brilliant mortals that ever lived, St. Augustine, he lived 354 to 430, in City of God, Augustine wrote, until we are in the city of God, we have an obligation to the city of man. And here's the thing, and I'll hush. If we're chained to a cell in a Marxist gulag, we could shout to our cellmates, "Be saved, believe in Jesus." You can do evangelism anywhere, but you can only engage in missions in a context of liberty, prosperity, stability. Your dad has done major crusades around the world. Countless millions have been brought to Jesus because of your family. I admire you, Randy, and your family, you and your family. But we can only engage in world missions. And that's why for 248 years, America has been at the forefront of the Great Commission, because we've had prosperity and liberty. And I would beg my pastor friends, preach and let's elect some conservative constitutionalists so that we can continue to live out Christ's Great Commission.
Yeah. And Alex, with the missions we do around the world, feeding 350,000 children every day, mainly sub-Saharan Africa, drilling water wells. And man, I've been in villages where children were dying from lack of clean drinking water, and we go in there and we drill a well, and it changes the community, and we do it openly in most places. Saying, yeah, we're Christians. We're here because we care. We want to share the love of Jesus with you in word and deed. And it's revolutionary. The sex trafficking that we're shutting down and helping, mainly girls get an education, develop life skills, get counseling, become whole again, see that they have a purpose. They're not just an object, a piece of meat. I mean, all that work is done because of people primarily in the United States, Canada, and Australia have a level of freedom to create a level of wealth to support this kind of thing. And so, when we talk about, you talk about balancing the budget, we look at overtaxation and things like that, and just the general economic prosperity of the country. That stuff actually is foundational to a lot of the missions work that we're doing. So it's not that it's not a matter of just being greedy and saying, well, we just need to, keep more of the money we earn. Well, we do, I think, just fundamentally as a principle. But it's also, so we can continue to fund these life-saving efforts and evangelistic efforts around the world. So, I mean, the issues, they are worldly, but it's a matter of, are we bringing heaven into this world, or are we letting hell take over?
Wow.
And a vacuum will be filled. And if Christians step out of it, the world's going to fill it, and it won't be with godly principles. So, so for maybe someone who hadn't voted and they've thought, Donald Trump, I don't like his language. I don't like the way he insults people, or maybe they believe some of the manipulation and the propaganda, from NBC News or somebody. What would you tell them? Because I think, and this is, again, it's typical in every election, we make it about the personality. The opposition, both sides, make it about the personality. This person's bad, they're whatever, he's low energy, or crooked Hillary. We hear these things all the time.
Yeah.
Politicians come and go. Man, we're still living with the policies that were put in place decades ago. How do we get Christians who are a little bit wanting to be on the sidelines to go, okay, I need to understand the policies that will impact generations, and I need to take action?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for the Christian, and Randy, thank you for devoting time to this. A verse that will transform how you look at life is 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. Paul says, we are not our own, we're bought with a price. So I challenge Christians, and Randy, I challenge myself to view all of life in terms of stewardship. We are not owners, we're stewards. And one of the stewardship things that we've been entrusted with is a vote and a voice. I mean, just think about this. I know things are tough these days, but we American Christians, we have recourse. We can vote. And yes, every vote matters. My goodness, the majority of elections are decided by very small margins of votes. So every vote matters. And I would say to every Christian that our vote is a stewardship issue. Now, when it comes to voting for Donald Trump, is he coarse? Does he say things I wish he wouldn't say? Yeah, Franklin Graham. And I was at the RNC this year. I was there for 4 days, and Franklin Graham said from the podium, he said, "Look, if I were his pastor, I would uh, disciple him a little bit about the way he talks." But look, folks, we're talking about. Just think, Kamala Harris, 2 weeks ago, somebody shouted, "Jesus is Lord," and she said, "You're at the wrong rally."
Yeah.
Hey, when the DNC a few years ago had a big national meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina, I sent some of my students, and they went. I was downtown Charlotte because I live in North Carolina, Randy. There were pentagrams. There were people conjuring Satan. I'm not making this up. I was down there. I saw it with my own eyes. Outside of the Coliseum, they drew pentagrams on the sidewalk. And when someone, it was the last time, and I'm thinking this was in 2012, the DNC, I think it was in Charlotte. It might have been '08. But when someone tried to open with prayer, everybody booed. So the DNC has removed God from their platform. Now, let me just say this. July 4th, 1837, our sixth president, John Quincy Adams, was giving a speech, and he said that our government was built, quote, on the Redeemer's mission. And the greatest glory of the American Revolution was that the principles of good civil government were united with biblical principles. So that's the truth. Randy, when I've been in developing nations, I've been to third world countries, and you have too, and we go to indigent people. And I want to say this: whenever I find a well, and as you mentioned, a freshwater well can transform a village. All right, whenever I find wells, hospitals, schools, literacy, getting children out of enslavement or sex trafficking, it's always Samaritan's Purse, Compassion International, World Help, World Vision, your family's ministry. Why is it, folks? Never. And I've been to 5 continents. I've spent 35 years of my life traveling the world nonstop. I've never seen American atheists, People United for the Separation of Church and State, the ACLU. I've never, or even the Democrat Party, they never contribute to the betterment of the human condition. It's always American Christians doing it. Why? Because Matthew 25 says if we give a cup of cold water in his name, it's as if we've done it for Jesus. So I guess I would just close by urging people, pray, take your vote, and forget that it's Donald Trump. If you don't like Trump, fair enough. We're not asking you to like Trump or call him as your next pastor, but who will defend the U.S. Constitution? I want to remind people, 3.5 years ago, I was paying $1.79 for a gallon of gas, not $4.09 like I did last night. My Maxwell House coffee that used to be $2.79 is now $5.45. What? On and on I could go. By the way, fact, and I'll hush, your grocery dollar, no matter where you live in America, your grocery dollar is 30 to 70% weaker than it was 3.5 years ago. Would you believe, Randy, I just talked to a guy who said he saw $8 for a dozen of eggs. That's crazy.
Yeah.
A dozen eggs used to be like $1.39. Let's pray. Let's save America, not only to have more discretionary spendable income, but so that we can still live out the Great Commission of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and that right there is just making it hard for a lot of people. You mentioned you like the brisket here in Texas before we started the program. I went and got a barbecue last week, my wife and I, and I was like, holy smokes, no pun intended, the price of the barbecue here at the restaurant has really, really gone up. And that's just reflective. I mean, all the prices have gone up. And on that note, I tell people, look, forget about Donald Trump and Kamala, however she says it. I don't mean any disrespect. Vote for yourself. Vote for yourself. Because my kids are in their 20s now, one of them in their 30s, and it's tough on them when the price of groceries goes up like that. They really feel it. So anyway, the voting. Okay, a few resources I want to give people, and you mentioned the foundational stuff and John Quincy Adams, and I don't think I've ever promoted this on my program, but I'm going to do it now. This is a book that I wrote with Senator Rand Paul a few years ago called Our Presidents and Their Prayers. It's just quotes from presidents, through every president up through Barack Obama when this was published, talking about God. Now, I don't know that Obama believed what he said, but he at least paid some lip service, and that's probably the case with multiple presidents. But if you just want to go, okay, how do I know what our leaders have said? Well, I quote them. All this book is, and then Rand Paul has some of his views interwoven into it. That's available on Amazon, Our Presidents and Our Prayers. But the main thing I want to point out is this is on Andrew's website. If you go to andrewmcfarland.com and then do a /vote, you will get a biblical worldview voting guide. Because I know sometimes, my wife, when we went to vote, she's like, man, I don't know who most of these people are, and I don't know what these ballot initiatives are. And I'm like, that's okay. Just vote for what you know. But we did a little primer over our barbecue about some of the issues. Okay, you've got hold that up there so people can see what that looks like.
Yeah, this is called the Faith and Freedom Voters Guide. It's at alexmcfarland.com/vote. And by the way, it's a downloadable PDF, and churches, we also have a bulletin insert. If churches, it's free. But I wrote this, Randy, about, and it's nonpartisan. It's neutral, although I do talk about some of the issues. And, one of the big things, one of the lasting legacies of any president are the judges that they appoint, not only SCOTUS, but the circuit courts. And I mean, if for no other reason, my goodness, you might think Donald Trump is the most odious person in the world. I disagree. But anyway, vote conservative constitutionalists just because of the judges. I mean, we're talking about freedom of religious expression, the rights of parents. My goodness, here's another subject I haven't even talked about, but several weeks ago there was a UN conference on multilateralism, which is another word for globalism. Joe Biden, and I've got two friends that were there. Joe Biden spoke and promised a group of 200 nations at the UN that American sovereignty would be subordinated to the multilateralism of the UN. And Biden told the group, my successor will affirm what I'm telling you, that America will subordinate to the UN. All right, we cannot lose our national sovereignty. So anyway, the Voter's Guide is up at alexmcfarland.com. I hope people will pray for our nation. I love America. I do. I'm very patriotic. But I love the Lord. My home is in heaven, of course. But as you and I would agree, we have to have a free, stable, prosperous America in which to have the means to invest in Christ's Great Commission. Yeah. And that's the bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it was the church that turned the godless, upside down, I mean, just outright awful Roman culture completely around. And so don't tell me that Christians aren't here to influence the culture. We are. So get informed. And, Paul took it right to the Greeks and the Romans, making arguments in their public platforms, using contemporary references and things like that. If you think that if you think that, you know, my home is heaven, but my world's going to hell, and that's okay, I don't think you understand the gospel. I really
Yeah,
don't.
right.
So,
And I'll say this in Acts 16, Acts 22, and Acts 25, Paul would invoke his Roman
he would.
citizenship
Yep, he sure
when
did.
it would serve his
That's
purposes.
right.
So I think the Apostle Paul is the greatest Christian that ever lived. Oh, he's like my hero, Randy. And so Paul, if anybody lived for heaven, of course it was Paul, and yet he was culturally and even governmentally engaged.
Yep, he was. Yep. All right. Well, people, invoke your citizenship. If you haven't voted, get out and vote, and let's just do what we're supposed to do. And if anything, you know, you may not like Trump. I consider him sort of a dam against the floodwaters that you don't want to be drowning in. And you've seen him. You've seen some of the craziness coming out. Anyway, all right, that's it for today. Alex, I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you do. Is there anything you want to add before I let you go? Anything people need to know about?
Well, my touring schedule is on there. We've got a couple of citywide crusades next year. We do
Great.
7 youth camps a summer, like 1,200 teenagers. And Randy, we teach kids obviously about the Lord Jesus. That's the main thing. But we teach kids to say the Pledge of Allegiance. Most teenagers don't even know there is a Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
But anyway, I appreciate you. You're so gracious. Thank you for having me, and hope you and I can. Let's get down to Texas and have some brisket.
Yeah, I'll get you those brisket tacos. If you haven't had those, you are missing out. And I want to keep having them. I want to go to jail because I'm a Christian. I literally know Christians in jail right now. So I mean, that's not crazy talk. It used to sound crazy, but let's turn this thing around, people. Get out there, do your duty to your country and to your God, and at least vote. That's the starting point. All right. Appreciate you guys out there. Hit the share button if you want to encourage someone, motivate somebody, and come back. Check out AlexMcFarland.com. Looks just like that. And we'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
Be true to what you said on paper.